joy and success. Every day is a chance for happiness. Yes, we can live a beautiful, crazy plan. Every day is a celebration. Every day is a celebration.
Welcome to the Great Song Adventure. It is an adventure because Paul and I have been interviewing so many people whose lives intertwine with each other in their histories. And it's an amazing thing when you put it all together. It's like a big map.
Yeah.
So this is our final episode with my mom, Carole King.
It says so much about her and other great songwriters I've spoken to, that gratitude for their gift. The greatest songwriters, so many of them, they don't feel, boy, I am great. Look at these songs. They feel grateful that they were a channel, that those songs came through them. And your mom says, that she felt like an instrument. The songs came through them. And she said, to us, you're both songwriters. I know you understand this. And it's true. As she says, you don't just go out and find the songs or create them. You follow them, and you're really interacting with the songs. And it's joyful. But, it takes a special kind of person. And she's very grateful for that gift, that she had that. And that's reflected throughout all of these interviews.
Yeah, that's true.
Your mom says that she felt like an instrument. The songs came through them. And she said, to us, you're both songwriters. I know you understand this. And it's true. As she says, you don't just go out and find the songs or create them. You follow them, and you're really interacting with the songs. And it's joyful.
And, that old saying that you've got to use it or you're going to lose it. It is something about showing up. On this episode, I was with her on my own. Paul had to go to visit his family in Chicago for Thanksgiving. And my mom had wanted to speak further about our conversation with Paul the previous day. So she and I just had a conversation on our own. And this is the last part of that conversation. And she did talk a lot about the other things she does besides songwriting. And it's very interesting. She takes the same work ethic and the same motivations into writing her book, into doing work to help the environment. And she talks about how it's all about being of service. That is her motivation. And even with songwriting, that was her motivation. How can I be a channel?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And she also, in an earlier episode, talked about being a performer, too. And as we spoke about it was different for her because she started as a writer. She didn't start as a singer. Singing wasn't her main thing, and she became a singer and a performer. But she spoke about, in a way I've never heard another famous recording artist say, that she felt this great love come when she would do a giant concert with, thousands and thousands of people. And she felt that love and felt at one point, I can't take that in. It's just too much love and it will destroy me. And for her, it was really important to stay grounded and not just to take in that adulation that so many people love to take in, and that's what they're living for. She actively had to kind of keep herself from that so it wouldn't, destroy her in some way or wreck who she was.
Real life was what grounded her.
Yeah.
And I could relate to that. I always wanted that. I
Mm-hmm.
never wanted to feel like I was floating off the planet. I wanted to feel like I was grounded. And it's interesting, my father's lyrics, he has that song, No Easy Way Down, which seems to talk about that very thing.
Mm-hmm.
Your toy balloon has set sail and now it must fall to the ground. What a song. I love that song.
Yeah, and both of you are that way, where the family mattered. And we know so many recording artists, they weren't good parents, especially for their first group of kids, maybe the next time around. They weren't there. They were out touring. And as you said, your mom didn't want to go on long tours. She wanted to be there to be a good mom. That's part of who she was. At the same time, she did write those songs. It is real. I mean, she wrote those songs that impacted our lives, that are standards. To me, it is a miracle what she did. But for her to accept that, it's just not who she is. She's got to remain a regular person and, keep herself grounded as a regular human being.
Yeah, I feel very fortunate to have her for a mother, not just because of the pride of her accomplishments, but really who she is as a person.
Yeah, and it was very special to share it with both of you, to have you both there, and I'm glad I was part of it.
Yeah, I'm glad you were too. And maybe one day you'll release the archives of the interview you did with my dad.
I'd love to. Just twist my arm.
Okay.
We got it.
All right, well.
Let's hear it. This is the final episode with your mom, episode 5.
You don't write that much now. because you don't feel the need to say something new. You feel you've done it all, and you're writing a book right now. Once you have this piece of clay in whatever it is you're creating, that's the creative thing where you're in flow.
It's interesting. I never had this with songwriting, but with the novel, which is, by the way, folks, for the record, a novel is a lot harder to write than a 3-minute pop song. I have found myself procrastinating and putting off that moment where I'm going to sit down and write. And I don't have fear of not being successful or good at it, because it's not about that for me. It's the doing. I don't know what stops me, but I do eventually just go, I sit down. And once I sit down, I have a gift of being open. I just open, like I did for songwriting. And the message that I would say is, have the discipline to find your time, set aside that time, and sit down and just take a breath, and then allow yourself to open, play the first notes, or type on the keyboard those first few lyrics. And don't edit yourself. Don't judge what's coming out. Let whatever comes out come out, even if it's crap. You think it's crap, just keep going, because that's how you need to be, to allow the flow of the creativity to come through you, unedited by you, unedited by anybody, unedited by expectations. Just keep going. And in that, when you're finished, you may not know if it's good or not, or you may think it's crap, but you just had the doing. And the doing is what it's about.
We talked a little bit about how population is expanding and the world is a different place than it was when you were starting out. It's hard for writers and artists to get a sense of audience, because they don't get that feedback of, oh, there's a crowd cheering for me, or look, I'm up on the charts, and oh, I have a record deal. Like, all these things that used to visually give us evidence. Maybe, okay, so you have all these followers, that doesn't really mean that much anymore. And a lot of people fake those things. You really want contact. You want to feel, I know who my audience is. I meet them, I see them, I talk to them, I know who they are. What would you do if you were you and made up exactly the same as you're made up, and you were with all of that, with the things the way they are now?
But you're doing what people need to do, which is, with your work and your abilities, you are doing it all. You're reaching out on social networks, you're creating product. You can better speak to all the things you're doing, but that's what people have to do now. I was plucked by a record company, and okay, I'm gonna do everything. It was a male in those days. Usually that's who the A&R men were, and here's this young girl, and they took me under their wing, and they did everything for me. That doesn't happen anymore. The record companies are so monstrous, and I don't mean in the terms of monster, I meant size. They're so huge, and at the same time, they give very few benefits. The artist is expected to come as a self-contained thing with a manager and a whole team of marketing and whatever. So it is very discouraging. So what you really have the answer in you more than I, because in those days, if I were that me today, I probably would be scared off. I would still write songs for fun or whatever, but I'd have some other career to make money, and I would love the doing, but I wouldn't try to make a career out of it. And also, I, as an older woman, have looked back and come to realize that in some way I was beautiful. And the name of the show, by the way, I did name the show, and I did write the song that named the show, because I didn't feel beautiful when I was young. I didn't feel like I measured up to the ideal, which could also be applied to Well, yeah, if the goal is to be at the top of the charts, if the goal is to go out there and perform for a lot of people, well, that terrified me anyway. So what I would have done is not try to achieve those top goals, and I wasn't even trying for that then. It was to do it. It was to write a song, to play it for a few people in a room and have them like it, and maybe have an artist who was beautiful and had a wonderful voice record it. So the person I was didn't set the external goals, but the goals that I controlled was I could write the song. So I go back to the doing. I'm saying that a lot today. You know me for a very long time. That's not something I've said a lot. I live it, but I keep coming back to the words, the doing of the thing. Love the doing of the thing. That's the goal.
What you say, and thank you for the compliment on my proactiveness. The challenges of the times are many, but in terms of just the doing part of it, there is a built-in challenge, which is you were a pencil and paper songwriter. You and Dad were pencil and paper songwriters. It had to do with limited tools, which is your imagination, a piano, a spiral notebook, or any kind of notebook. I think they were always almost spiraled when I saw them. And, a pencil, a pen. You didn't even have something to record memos on. So you had to remember what you were writing or write it down somehow.
And there were moments when Jerry would go, "No, that's not it. You did it another way 5 minutes ago. See if you can get that back."
We all have to imitate Jerry in our family. It brings him back in the room.
His voice is so in our heads.
Yeah.
The
New York.
That was his later, slowed down voice. But I remember the one, no, you gotta get that Sherelle's record.
Yeah, so now there's so much distraction. There's so many things to derail a person from the moment they wake up. Our phones are almost always within 3 feet of where we sleep, right? And you go out to dinner and everybody's phone is at the table, even if it's turned off or face down. People keep their personal devices with them everywhere they go, and people are looking at them, throughout the course of any activity. I mean, it's considered to be the exception, not the rule, that people will be in their life without getting distracted by something online, either a text, something on social media. I mean, we're constantly inundated with that. So I feel that...
Isn't that called FOMO?
Fear of missing out?
Yes.
Yeah, well, FOMO. But it interferes with the doing. It interferes with the being present.
Only if you let it. One lets it. I'm not addressing you, but only if one lets it.
Right. So this is a good thing to talk about, because the first thing is to create a space for the doing and to protect that space. If you create the space and you just really ensure that you're not going to interrupt even your desire to avoid by writing the song, that seems like an important first step.
Absolutely. I have nothing to add to that.
So I know that when you and Dad were writing songs and going to Donnie Kirshner, with We Want to Get the Next Cut, sometimes there would be something called sideways songs where someone would have a hit and they, would say, write a song in the style of, or we'll get the follow-up record for the Drifters. How many of those did you do? Did you ever write sideways songs? Because sometimes they would be
all
bigger.
The time.
Yeah, you did?
Well, and the name, writing it sideways, it's sort of the code word because you didn't, what it really means is influenced by.
Yeah. So,
for example, if you have these, you could actually play them. Mm-hmm. For example, we were trying to get the follow-up to the Sherelle's big first hit, Tonight's the Night. That turned out to be Will You Love Me Tomorrow?
Oh, there was a chronological thing in it.
Oh, totally that was the record we were trying to be influenced by. And the ability, you write it sideways. It's not literally sideways. It was just the colloquialism that we used to say influenced by. That being said, I think they are both in the key of C, if I remember correctly. Not sure, but
Which
I
is
think...
a good key for your voice, anyway.
I seem to come home to that, and C and D a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so with that in our heads, Jerry takes it to the next level lyrically and says, well, tonight's the night. Tomorrow, will you still love me tomorrow, right? So Jerry writes, will you love me tomorrow as the answer to tonight's the night. Yeah, but will you love me tomorrow? And I write in the same key, and it's a major. You say you're gonna love me, tonight's the night. So it's C major chord, and then A minor, and basic rock and roll chords. So I write those chords, and there are some chords that aren't major, but there's a lot of major chords in Will You Love Me Tomorrow? That's one example. Sometimes Barry and Cynthia would be writing in the next cubicle, and we'd hear something they were writing, and it would find its way into something we were writing, because we were both trying to get the follow-up to the same thing.
So competitive.
It was competitive, and of course that made us better. That's very clear in the musical, how having them in the next room competing to get that next whoever follow-up made Jerry and me strive to be even better, and we were influenced by each other. And I don't know if I said this before, but Barry Mann, I used to think, and I still do, I think he was a more complex writer than I am. His music had an aspirational thing about it. It seemed to want to take you higher. And I can't explain what I mean by that, but that's what his music does for me. And I'm not comparing better, worse, it's just what was different about him for me was this ability that he had. He had more vocal range too, I think. Yeah, I mean, that was part of it too. But all of us writers understood the concept of writing a song, quote, sideways. It was like you're influenced by what was already the hit. You wanted to try to do that and more, but make it recognizable to the artist so that they say, yeah, I just had a hit with that kind of thing, only this is so much better.
Writing songs is the best real estate, really, because if you're inspired by something in 1969, you write a sideways song. The thing you were influenced has its own, it goes down the river in its own way. You go down the river in your own way. And then, however many years later, those songs become separate entities where the fact that they were inspired by or, influenced at the same time is not even noticeable anymore.
Well, that's why these interviews that you're doing and why I'm so enjoying doing this particular interview in the room, and we're able to remember those things and bring that memory of that song that influenced the song that maybe got bigger coverage over the decades and say, well, yeah, we couldn't have done it without this. And going back to Lieber and Stoller, Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller, and you, of course, interviewed Mike Stoller, they influenced Jerry and me profoundly. Not only they brought classical music to R&B and created this thing that we just went, oh my God. And that was a sideways kind of thing too. You hear Spanish Harlem with strings.
Well, that's an example. You were talking about Barry writing and bringing you to another level or bringing things up to another level. I feel that a song like Spanish Harlem, it took pop music structure, but by the story that was created, it started to feel like little mini movies with visuals in them. And then that got taken further in the 70s with the confessionals and like Don Henley's lyrics, where it would be a bigger movie. That was really the change that made little 3-minute pop songs, which you were influenced by in the beginning with Sitting on My Baby, 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 Sitting, and to really talk about people of a certain time, what their lives were like. They were like little novels that you would fit into this structure.
Yeah. And there were protest songs. There were abundant, so many, I can't believe we're on the eve of destruction. Barry Maguire, I think. And
yeah, we talked to Lou about him.
Yeah. So, and now there are many more protest songs, but not everybody hears them, because that's the other difference. There was mainstream pop radio, and most people heard that. Yes, there were R&B stations that were listened to by a certain, genre for people who particularly liked that. There was country music for people who particularly liked that. And sometimes they'd come into the mainstream. They'd come in and out of the mainstream and catch, the majority's ears. That isn't happening anymore. As you pointed out, there are so many genres and so many artists that, have a limited following. And how do you break through to the mainstream? I guess there is a mainstream, I'd say Beyonce and Jay-Z are in the mainstream, Katy Perry's in the touring, Lady Gaga, the touring artists who fill stadiums, Bruce Springsteen is still in the mainstream, has been for a long time. But it is harder today to break into that massive mainstream, and usually requires an arena and all the stuff you do for an arena. And when James and I went out in 2010 on the Troubadour Reunion Tour, the idea that we would be playing in an arena and we needed visuals behind us and a bit of a production, and even yet with all that, it was important, certainly to me, and I think to James too, to keep it to us and the band, and that would be the core, the center of it. But that's what we always did, and we were lucky to break through to a mainstream. I mean, who'd have thought?
And sometimes it has to do with things just lasting long enough. If it lasts long enough, the word gets out, and the audience, by osmosis, gets bigger. It's just an important thing for people to manage, not compare the past to their present and come up short, because it is a different time and the tools are different and the population is different and the means of getting the word out is different. And adaptability, to me, is the key. Adaptability. You've got to be adaptable as an artist. Artists throughout all time and all mediums have always been adaptable. And they're usually the first people who are in any scene, which is why it's great to live near the artists and see what they're writing about. But for example, right now, I play solo because that is my adaptation to the way things are now. I made a record that has a band on it, and I wanted to be able to do that, but I realized it's not practical. I'm going to have to be able to play all these songs by myself. But over the years, I've just learned them better and had to, as you always say, you punt. And that's the adaptation, whatever it takes. Mm-hmm. That's what artists do. I mean, I feel like that's our job.
Absolutely. And I think in hearing you say all that, maybe this was a protective thing that I developed, but when I say that I love the doing is what I control. And even that, I mean, I work in tandem with the muse or whatever inspires us, but the doing, I can control that. I sit down and I open myself up and I trust that whatever happens is going to come and be rewarding in and of itself because I am doing it. Mm-hmm. But beyond that, the fact that I have achieved the enormous success that I've achieved, I never even imagined myself doing that or dreamed of it. In fact, the very idea of fame was anathema to me. It was like, oh man, people are going to recognize me on the street. I'm not going to have any privacy. I'm an introvert, all this stuff. And I was scared of performing. So that wasn't even in my frame of thinking. And the fact that this has happened is something I've had to learn how to accept and deal with. But to people who are just starting out, I want to remind people that I got here by just the doing, and everything else it was sort of a partnership, but I don't want to say I was dragged into it, because maybe I was offered a hand. So, the hand reached out and said, well, come here, I'm taking you this way. And I'm like, I don't know. And it just kept carrying me. But I'm saying to people who want that, by all means, want it, but don't build your hopes and your dreams around that happening. And if it doesn't happen, don't consider yourself a failure. Because if anything, if you do sit down and you have the doing, you do the thing, and you accomplish just the doing, you have done something. And that's the part that you can hold to your heart and say, yes, this is an achievement. And by all means, keep striving for the rest, but don't depend on it emotionally. Because
that's
if you
good with
do,
just about anything.
I guess it is.
Yeah.
I didn't think about that. But
don't burn your hard drive. Save your songs. You may need them one day. You may actually really like them one day.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's true.
Yeah, I think that covers everything. Oh, you did mention one thing about Sideways songs that I had a question that I didn't ask.
Okay.
What influenced Beautiful? You said you were on the subway and, the people watching, but musically, what influenced musically Beautiful?
I think I had in mind something by the Beatles. It's not the same beat, but Mr. Kite. For the benefit of Mr. Kite. It's this sort of whimsical, musical thing. It's not the same. The beats are completely different. So it's not even sideways. It's just a concept, a construct of whimsical and, free
association.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But other than that, the chord structure, it was... I don't know where that came from. The chords just came, and I think Paul was saying that they're really complex, and I don't think of them as that because they came out of me and I understand them and know them, but I get that. I could see where that would be. And the modulations, I do love chords.
Yes.
I do love chords.
Where did that come from, the love of chords?
Probably Richard Rodgers. His chords were very simple, but then he'd go into things, and in Hello Young Lovers, there's a thing. Are we mic'd?
Yeah.
I'm going to the piano. I think I have this right. Where are we? Hello, young lovers, wherever you are. I hope your troubles are free. It's like, what? And he did that a lot. He just put in, the melody has the same flow it would have had if he'd have done this. Oh my good wishes go with you tonight, right?
Yeah.
But he goes, oh my good wishes go with you tonight. And I was fascinated by that. And I was very young when I heard that. But
and you figured out how to play it then?
I learned, I always trained by ear, and I'm still struggling with Earth, Wind, and Fire as we speak today. Earlier today, I was trying to figure out a chord in Let's Groove Tonight.
I'm sure if you wrote them an email, they'd send it back to you.
No, I got it.
Okay.
I actually got it. It's all online now, too.
Well, sometimes those online chords are really
Wrong.
Messed up.
That's true.
Very wrong.
But I have enough musical knowledge to know when it's wrong, and I find the one online.
Well, you busted me. I learned It Might As Well Rain Until September and recorded the whole song, and I thought, wow, it's got all these amazing chords, and I loved my recording. I played it for you, and you went, that's not right. And I was like, oh, I'm not re-recording this. I got this off of Google Chords or something. But yeah, getting those subtlety of voicings is important. I have one more question, because you started off with, writing for people who were singers, crooners, and then people who were bands started doing songs.
By the way, singers, crooners, Steve Lawrence, Go Away, Little Girl.
Yeah.
That, I remember Don Costa produced that.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember watching them do a whole take. with Steve in the vocal booth, the orchestra completely surround him, everybody playing live, a big orchestra, scale, union scale. And I think one trombone player made a mistake and they had to do the whole thing again from the beginning because the technology was such that all you did was record it. You had to get it right. But yeah, and Steve he's such a good singer. A crooner, indeed.
And live with an orchestra, that's
Amazing.
Definitely another time. It's amazing. Well, I was just thinking, for example, the Animals, Don't Bring Me Down. When were you writing that for them, for a band, and did you write differently when you thought, because some of those songs are, in terms of chords, less ornate, less sophisticated because they're to be played on guitars. Not that you can't do that on a guitar, but a rock band usually has a more rhythm-driven track and less chordal.
I don't think I was conscious of that as the musician of the team.
Yeah.
I don't think I was, but maybe Jury's lyrical approach suggested a simplicity that would work with the band.
So do you remember writing that song?
Vaguely, but I don't remember what was in my head.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I know I wrote it, and I think we wrote that on Waddington Avenue in New Jersey.
What was Ferguson Road about?
Jerry took it. I know the answer to that. Jerry and I were not together at the time he wrote that, I believe. And I think he took his girlfriend up to Big Sur, and there was a road called Ferguson Road that he wrote about.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I could go on with songs and asking where they're from, and everybody would be so happy that I asked you because they would always be wondering. And but there's so many of them to remember.
It's, again, I found myself in the right place at the right time at two stages of my life. One was being, in New York for the Songwriter Era when everybody, it was transitioning from the 40s and the 50s when there was like the guy in the elevator would come up and say, "Hey, I got a song for you," to the publisher.
Yeah.
And the publisher would actually say, "Yeah, I'll listen to it." But being around then and that whole cubicle thing that Donnie Kirshner and Alan Evans, but Donnie mostly, put us all in cubicles and had us competing with each other was sort of a brilliant thing, for business-wise, but it made us all better.
Yeah.
And generated so many hits. And then moving out to California and having another incarnation of being one of the singer-songwriters that played at the Troubadour. And there's a whole documentary about a bunch of us, Bonnie Raitt, James Taylor, Jackson Browne, and have worked with a lot of these people. And it was an era, and, there I was. I was just, I was a mom in New York with you and Sherry, and then I had children with Charlie, your brother and sister, and then I was being a mom with them, and I fell into this, singer-songwriter thing. And from there, I just don't know. I've had an amazing life. I've gotten to do so many things, and as I sit here at 76 with one hopes a couple of decades more in good health, God willing, I just feel so lucky because the doing is always the most important thing to me. And I have had so much doing in my life. So I'm really, really grateful.
You're a human being and a human doing. You're both. They say, don't just be a human doing, be a human being, and you are both.
Exactly.
And you do a lot of things that aren't musical, and work really hard at those too, like all the political, environmental work you do. And I remember being so impressed when you said, when I do music, I'm Carole King, but when I'm lobbying to save the Rockies, I don't have a staff, I don't have an assistant, I write all the emails myself, I plan all the travel myself. Every aspect of what I'm doing on a grassroots level, and I'm doing it because I care. So, you're not just riding on your laurels. You're doing something in an area where, you don't necessarily have a lot of clout. You're another person, you're who you are, but you're still another person who wants something from that senator and needs to put all the pieces together to get something passed or on the floor?
Yes, it's very difficult. It's one of those things where you're up against massive extractive industries that are, they don't care. They're just not looking at anything but their bottom line, and we're seeing what's happening today. But yeah, that's another doing, a thing that I've been doing that brings me so much joy, even though we haven't got the result we're looking for yet. It's been over a quarter of a century since I first started trying to protect the Northern Rockies ecosystem and learned what an ecosystem actually is. And it's really difficult, but what has come out of the doing of it is the sense of purpose, the sense of educating people, the sense, and I would relate this back to songwriting, because if you're a person starting out as a songwriter or whatever you're starting out as, it might take decades, but so that's why you have to love the part where you're doing it and the people you meet as you're doing it, the people who come and see you and say, this is great, and maybe it's only 3 people, but it's 3 more people you didn't know before. And that's the part where, with the environmental work, that's a lesson that I learn all the time. And yes, the goal, by the way, is so much more important than whether you have the number 1 record or you're out there bringing in, 65,000 people, which I'm not denigrating. I'm just saying that it's even more important that we do something to protect our planet and that we do something to take care of people who are vulnerable. And I didn't want to talk politics, and I'm not talking in terms of a party. I'm talking of things that are important for all of us to remember as we go forward in life, because we might be one of those vulnerable people someday, and we are being affected by climate change.
And we only have one world. We have one planet. It's not like we can, move to another location.
Well, there are those who will say, who knows, maybe we could move, we'll find another planet. That's not what it's about. Treasure the one we have.
If anyone's listening, where can people go to find out more information about the Rockies?
Well, I work with a group called the Alliance for the Wild Rockies, and I think that is their website. But if they just look up Alliance for the Wild Rockies, they'll find it. That's the website. There's also a Facebook page, and they're on the socials. But that's the homepage. And then the bill that I've been trying to pass is called the Northern Rockies Ecosystem Protection Act. And just to put this into perspective, so say that you live in Florida and you go, what do I care about the Northern Rockies? If you're having rising waters and bigger hurricanes, that is because we are losing the carbon. The Northern Rockies is a massive 25 million acres of more or less intact forests. Those trees store carbon, and they don't, they give a little break to climate change. And the more you destroy those trees, the faster those oceans are going to rise and the worse the hurricanes are going to be. So when you think about it, it really is all connected. So that's why wherever you live on the planet, you should want those forests protected.
That's amazing. Well, thank you.
Thank you. This is awesome.
It's a beautiful day today. Here.
Thank you, Paul.
Yes, and thank you for coming and doing this lovely interview.
Onward.
Onward.
Onward. That was the end of our 5-part series of interviews with Carole King, Louise's mom. A good place to end. And she even thanked me at the end. And I liked hearing that because she said my name just like my mom. So she goes, Paul. It's really Paul, but my mom, your mom's from New York, so there's a reason she speaks that way. My mom says Paul too, but I just love getting to talk to your mom and hanging out with the two of you together. I really got to see a side of her that people don't usually get to see, and it was really special.
Yeah, well, you were there in spirit, and it was good. I was very surprised when she said, I got more I want to say, and we sat down, and I thought it was going to be another 15 minutes, of the quote unquote addendum to the original interview. But so it was great. I'm so grateful we got to do this. And we have some amazing episodes coming up too.
Yes. This next year is going to be a great great year with the Great Song Adventure. And what a wonderful way to start. So thank you very much, Carole, for doing that. Please thank her for us.
Oh, yeah. I thank you. Thank you, Mom. You know, Paul, when we started this, I said, there's no way I can do a podcast every week. And what's happened is I've enjoyed this so much, you know, just in the way that we're talking about when you enjoy the doing, that creates its own momentum. I've really enjoyed doing this podcast, and it's just become another creative outlet.
Well, that's great. And I do too. It's a lot of fun. And when I start listening to them, I get engrossed with these talks too. They're very compelling. I love listening to them. So it's a very great thing to get to do. And it's so much fun to do it with you.
Yeah, it is fun. And, you know, I learned something too. Podcasts at their best, it's kind of like having family in the next room. You know, when you're home and, you know, you hear the sound of people running around doing things in the next room. And if you're a little introverted like I am, you know, I like to feel surrounded by people and friends and family. And when I put these podcasts on, I could be alone. I always feel so uplifted. I hope our listeners are enjoying them too. And if you are enjoying these, please jump onto iTunes, write your comments, write your reviews. We love hearing from you. And it's great to let other people know your feelings about what you're hearing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, let us know what you're thinking about these talks, and we're happy to share them with you. We got some great ones coming up this year. And but that was special. It was great to get to do that one. 5 parts with Carole King.
We are the Great Song Adventure.